this week's episode of Football Talk. We have a few things to talk about this week. I mean, not a lot has happened since our last episode where we had a whole lot to talk about. So, we're going to start off with Malcolm Butler going to the Cardinals. That kind of helps make up for their loss of Patrick Peterson, I think, because Malcolm Butler, he's not a bad cornerback. He was the one who won the Super Bowl for the Patriots when they threw the ball on 2nd and goal. So he was the he was the hero of that game. He's a pretty solid person to have in your backfield, I believe, and it helps that he came in when they lost Patrick Peterson, because Patrick Peterson is older, Malcolm Butler's a little younger. He still has some years left in him, so I think it was a pretty good trade-off. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Malcolm Butler improves any team's secondary.
Right.
I mean, it's not a flashy move by any means, but they probably got him for a fairly reasonable rate, and it'd be a good addition to their secondary.
Absolutely. The Giants signed Kyle Rudolph along with Kenny Golladay. Oh my gosh. So they're getting Daniel Jones some weapons. They got Saquon Barkley, which was literally the only person who was capable of doing anything on that offense. And now they're signing weapons and targets for Daniel Jones. And I still don't think it's really going to do much, because Daniel Jones is not the quarterback you want running your franchise, regardless if you have Kenny Golladay and Kyle Rudolph and Saquon Barkley. He's not the type of guy to utilize those weapons, I don't think. But, I've been wrong before.
Yes, you have been wrong before. Just kidding. But with Kenny Golladay, it's crazy how much that cost him. I think it cost him like 4 years, $72 million. Crazy price tag for him. Kyle Rudolph, I'm sure, came at a much lower rate, but it also brings to question what they plan to do with Evan Ingram. I mean, we've seen Evan Ingram has a lot of talent, but he's had a lot of issues staying on the field as well. And any fantasy owner that's had Evan Ingram will tell you that it's one of the most frustrating things that there is to have Evan Ingram, because of the fact that one day he goes off and has a great performance, but the next day he's non-existent and gets 0 caught balls for, no yardage.
Absolutely.
And so you see that, and then he's constantly injured. So it'll be interesting to see if Kyle Rudolph takes over that tight end 1 spot for the Giants, or if they keep throwing Ingram out there hoping that he eventually figures it all out. But he's still a very young tight end, so a lot of time to grow and become better and become that dependable tight end that I think every organization needs. It just makes a huge difference when a team has a good tight end, just because there's always that safety net should a play break down to throw it down underneath to your tight end. And we've seen over the years with the Patriots' success, how much that is attributed to having at least one tight end. But at one point they obviously have Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski, so they had two really good tight ends, and that really carried them to a couple Super Bowl victories.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. A team is definitely a lot better when they have a solid tight end, because not only is the tight end good for like third down situations or short passes or blocking, or they're good for a lot of things. They can catch, they can block. Sometimes they can come in and act as a fullback, but that doesn't happen too often. But I do think it's reasonable to believe that Kyle Rudolph will definitely be the starter over Evan Ingram. He's proven himself to be a pretty solid choice at the tight end position for the Vikings. And I think he will. The Giants brought him in for a reason. I don't think that Evan Ingram even has a chance.
He's super dependable and durable, and that's what I think the Giants have needed. I mean, in the years past, Daniel Jones, especially last year, lost all of his weapons. Everybody was injured,
right? And no more Odell.
It just left him. It just left him throwing to nobody. Like, he had no weapons, and it's hard to gauge how good a quarterback is when you take away all his weapons, and when you take away his run game too. Again, we talk about how important a run game is to a successful franchise. With a good running back, it makes everything else easier. Everything else comes easier because they have to respect that part of the game. They have to bring safeties up to cover against the run, and that opens up the deep ball. And so, a good running game is tremendously important. And when you take a young quarterback and you get rid of his run game with the injury of Saquon, obviously last year, there's not much that he has to work with, and that was reflected in the Giants' record.
Right, and like you're saying, the run game, it's very valuable to any offense, because if you have a solid run game, it opens up the offense, and it gives you more options against the defense, because if you don't have a run game, you're very one-dimensional, and the defense is going to know that you're going to be passing it on 90% of the plays. But when you have a solid run game, that opens up the run game, so you have more plays in your arsenal, you have more ways to trick the defense. But not only in the run game, it also helps in the pass game, because then it opens up for the quarterback for play action passes and run option plays and run pass options is what I meant. And so it opens up this whole new playbook that you don't have if you don't have a decent running game.
Right. Absolutely.
So moving on, our reigning Super Bowl champions, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, have re-signed all 22 of their starters. So their entire starting team, the offense and defense from last season winning the Super Bowl, will continue to be their starting team this upcoming season. And I believe the last time it said that happened was in the 70s. So the Buccaneers are doing something right. They won a Super Bowl with that team. They're going to keep it together. No major moves, because, nothing needs to be done for a team that just came away from the Super Bowl in a blowout victory. Yeah,
it's amazing. You have to be so excited if you're a Tampa Bay sports fan. I mean, last year you had, the Tampa Bay Rays that went to the MLB World Series, lost in 7 games, but made it really competitive. And then you have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that won the Super Bowl, and now they look like they're in a position to chase, a back-to-back title, which has been done so infrequently in the NFL. I think there's only been a handful of teams that have won back-to-back, and as we see with the Chiefs, it's really hard to do.
Right.
But signing all your starters and having continuity, now everybody has a Super Bowl run under their belt. They all know what you expect from each other, and they know where their weaknesses are, where their strengths are. I mean, that's a dangerous team this year again, and I have to say that they're going to be the Super Bowl favorites. I mean, I just can't see anyone else. Obviously we're a long way away, so injuries happen along the way, preventing teams from going after a repeat. But the way it's shaping up, they're looking to be. Well, they are actually not even looking to be. They are the exact same team that won the Super Bowl last year.
The same team.
Mm-hmm. So it'll be really exciting to see what they could do with the same group of guys, and like Jimmy said, running it back.
Right. Yeah, you're right. It's hard for a team to win back-to-back Super Bowls. I mean, just ask the Bills; they lost 4 in a row. So, and plus, bringing back the same exact team, like the same exact team, you have chemistry. You have a team that already works well together. You have these teammates that are used to playing together. You're not bringing anything new. You're not mixing things up. You're going with the same exact formula that won you the Super Bowl a season ago, which is genius. Right. So the Bears have made their decision to make Andy Dalton the starting quarterback over Nick Foles. They tweeted about it, and their fans completely lost it. They got roasted and torched by everybody because they were bragging. We're gonna make Andy Dalton the starter, thinking they were doing something cool, and they just got torched on Twitter. It was the funniest thing. Because, Andy Dalton is not a better quarterback than Nick Foles. I believe that. Nick Foles is...
I agree.
He has a ring on his finger. He won a Super Bowl. Andy Dalton has never done well in the playoffs. Nick Foles has experience. Andy Dalton has experience. But Andy Dalton doesn't have the playoff or Super Bowl experience that Nick Foles has. And I believe that Nick Foles is just an all-around better quarterback than Andy Dalton is. So this is a very dumb decision on the Bears' part.
I agree. I think Nick Foles is a much better quarterback. I love his nickname too, Big Dick Nick, and he's lived up to that. I mean, obviously, you got that big contract with Jacksonville that didn't work out, but I still think he's a really good quarterback, and he's someone you still want to lead your team. At this point, I don't think Andy Dalton is that player, and so very interesting decision by the Chicago Bears.
And they're proud of it.
Again, we talked about that. Yeah, and we talked about that last week too. I think it would have been smarter to get a cheap Mitch Trubisky and see if he could turn his career around, rather than an Andy Dalton where you're gonna what you're gonna get, and it's not good what you're gonna get.
Right.
So I definitely disagree with that decision made by the Bears management, and I would not have done that. I would not have made that decision to choose Andy Dalton over Nick Foles, and Andy Dalton over Mitch Trubisky.
Absolutely. Andy Dalton is not the quarterback to build your franchise around or even have leading your franchise when you have Mitch Trubisky as an option and Nick Foles. You had two decent choices at quarterback, and you just threw them away for Andy Dalton, which makes zero sense to me because we've seen that Andy Dalton's been in the league like 80 years and has never done anything. So
not done anything. Exactly right. Exactly right.
So also in this past week, the 49ers sold their soul to the devil to get the third pick overall, and it looks like they're going to be going with Justin Fields is the rumor. So I think
Justin Fields is the rumor. Okay, yeah.
It's not a bad decision on the Niners' part because we've seen Jimmy G isn't capable of leading a franchise. So bringing in a new quarterback and Justin Fields, I believe, is a very wise decision on the Niners' part. I wouldn't say that they should have traded away the entire future of their franchise for it with the amount of draft picks they traded away, but I think it was a pretty solid decision to bring in Justin Fields and get the number 3 pick.
Yeah, I think Justin Fields is a really good quarterback. It'll be interesting to see how he does with the Niners, but it's a great place to start for him. I mean, they have a great defense already over there. Just need to get healthy this next year. Right. And yeah, that'd be a great scenario for him to inherit. What I'm also interested in seeing is what the Niners do with Jimmy Garoppolo. There's been rumors that they want to ship him back to New England, but it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing with him.
Send him to the Bears. He's fine.
I think, it'll be interesting to see what they do with Jimmy G. And going back to the trade, it's really it's crazy. I mean, the Dolphins just fleeced the Texans. The Dolphins traded before last season. They traded Laramie Tunsil to the Texans to get the Texans' first round pick. Mm-hmm. And the Texans thought obviously going to be good, so it was going to be a low draft pick. Well, it turns out Texans really had a really tough year last year, and so the Dolphins got the number 3 overall pick, and they knew that that's not something they wanted to. Maybe the player that they wanted they could get later in the draft, and so they traded that number 3 for, I believe, it ended up being 3 first-rounders and 2 second-rounders. And so they just got incredible value out of Laramie Tunsil, who was going to be a failed player for their organization. And so I really like what I'm seeing out of the Dolphins. I really like what I'm seeing from the Dolphins. And, before all this stuff came down with Deshaun Watson and these allegations, I would say they were accumulating, draft picks to make a run at Watson, but obviously now with all the accusations against him, they're not going to. But that Dolphins organization is going to have a lot of really talented players in the next couple of years, all those first-round picks. And so I'm really excited to see what they turn that into. I mean, they were a playoff team last year.
Yeah, they blew everyone's mind. Nobody saw that happening.
They were a playoff team, and they were a lottery team the year before, and they turned that into a playoff run, and now they have all these draft picks on their hands, and it's going to be really exciting to see. I mean, if you're a Dolphins fan, you have to be looking forward to these upcoming years to see what they can do with all these draft picks. And I mean, we've seen teams with draft picks before not use them correctly,
Raiders.
And not. Yeah, or the Oakland Raiders, for example, and not turn them into success. But, you have to be excited. There's a lot of potential there for a great team to be built.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We saw back in the 90s, I believe it was, when the Cowboys traded, it was Tony Dorsett or it was another running back that they had. They traded him for a ton of draft picks. And that was the year they ended up drafting Emmitt Smith. I think they got Ed Too Tall Jones that year. Smith. And a bunch of other solid players that won them next 2.
Yeah, because they got what? They got Emmitt, they got Too Tall. Did they? Who else did they get?
I know they had
Michael
Michael Irvin the year before because I'm pretty sure Troy Aikman and Michael Irvin were on the team before, but I know they got some.
Didn't they get a corner in that? I thought they got a corner in that.
Yeah, they got a corner.
Or safety.
I remember because they got some pretty solid pieces on their defense.
Was that they didn't get? No, I was thinking Deion Sanders, but
that
it was a different guy. Maybe it was Michael Irvin they got in that trade.
Yeah, Deion Sanders came to the Cowboys later through the Falcons.
Anyway, yeah, but they got all those draft picks and they turned that into
a Super Bowl winning franchise.
Couple Super Bowls, right? They won 2 Super Bowls.
Yeah, there was like 2 or 3 Super Bowls.
So we've seen that if you do that right, I mean, you could set your team up for years on years, especially too because of the contracts. Like when you're getting these players on their rookie contracts, you can get a ton of value out of them, and you're not paying them a ton. And it goes back to what we talked about the max contracts for quarterbacks. When you get these players young and you don't have to pay them a bunch early on, that's how you build a Super Bowl winning team.
Absolutely.
And that's been true for a long time. I mean, look at the Niners, right? The Niners had a number 2 overall pick a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. And because all the players they got were through the draft, they had a really young team, a very talented team, and they were able to, although they came up short to the Chiefs, they were able to make the Super Bowl.
Yep, and in other sports as well, like, building your team through the draft is something that's completely plausible rather than spending all the money. Like the Rams, there's 2 ways to do this in the NFL. You could spend a bunch of money and buy a Super Bowl team, or you can build your own Super Bowl team from scratch from the draft. The Rams, they bought their team. They're using a borrowed team. They're not going to be able to pay all those players forever. The Dolphins, they're going to be able to draft up a good team, and we've seen this with the Warriors, who, when they had their super team dynasty, they drafted all those players. They drafted Steph, they drafted Clay, they drafted Draymond. All their starting players who made that team super solid, they came straight to the Warriors from the draft. So, we've seen that in the NFL too. Like in other, like every sport, you can build through the draft and build a winning team through the draft.
Right, and I think it's been really interesting too for me because, like we mentioned, obviously the Miami Dolphins, but we also have another team in Florida, the Orlando Magic, that have this trade deadline accumulated a lot of draft picks as well. And so we're seeing this model starting to take shape where teams are either trying to buy all their players and build that way, or they're looking at the draft as a way to build their dynasty. And, again, there's really those 2 schools of thoughts that we've seen time and time again. We have, we see more of the Lakers school of thought, right? Where the Lakers are building their team through stealing players from other organizations, with the exception of Irvin Magic Johnson and James Worthy. Obviously, there's a couple of exceptions. Kobe Bryant was homegrown, but for the most part, they've been getting a lot of players from other organizations or a combination of the 2. And then you have the Celtics are all homegrown players. Every single one of their guys that they got are homegrown, have been playing with the Celtics their entire careers. And so you see those two different ways of looking at things, and neither is more wrong or right than the other, but that's there. You have 2 kind of crossroads. You have a crossroads of where you want to take your team. Do you want to win now and look at buying players, or do you want to secure your future by just rebuilding and accumulating draft picks and then turning those draft picks into success stories? And so we've seen that time and time again in sports, and I don't expect that model to go away anytime soon because it works or it doesn't work, and then you start over again.
Right, and personally, I think the way the Dolphins are doing it is a lot better than the Rams' method of doing it, because when you pay all the superstars to come to your team, you're not going to have that team for very long. You're going to be good for a couple seasons, and then you're going to have to restart. If you build through the draft, like you said, you don't have to pay a ton of money to those players at the start, and you can build with a very young team and get you to the Super Bowl with minimum salary cap being hit. But the Rams, they're going to be hitting all their salary cap, paying all these big name players. And so I think, building your team from the draft and building up young is the better way to do it, because then you're building a franchise and you're not just renting a team for a couple years.
Right, totally.
So moving on, the Vikings signed Xavier Woods, who used to be a safety for the Cowboys, to line up alongside Patrick Peterson in the backfield. So they're kind of stacking that backfield and creating a very impressive secondary that we've seen the Vikings have in the past. Xavier Woods is no Xavier Rhodes, but he'll definitely help out alongside Patrick Peterson. So the Vikings, it looks like they're building on their secondary in this offseason.
Yeah, I think that's I saw a lot of people like that move, and I personally do as well. Nice nice compliment to Patrick. Do we say Patrick
Right.
Peterson?
Mm-hmm.
It was that went there to the Vikings. Yeah, nice compliment to Patrick Peterson. And now they kind of have their secondary going. We'll just have to see if their pass rush can match their secondary's intensity. Obviously those two are very important. It's a very symbiotic relationship. We see when someone has a good pass rush, it makes it easy on their secondary.
Right.
And if they have a good secondary,
vice
it makes it
versa.
easy on their
Yeah.
pass rush. And so we see they both play off each other. So it'll be exciting to see what turns out with the Vikings. But again, I've expressed concern in the past about Kirk Cousins as the starting quarterback, and I still feel those concerns. And so it'll be interesting to see if they could ever turn a team led by Kirk Cousins into one that's a Super Bowl contender.
Absolutely. In the NFL, it looks like they're finally bringing in the 17-game season that has been in question for a few years. I think they are doing a 3-game preseason now and a 17-game regular season, which I think is super exciting because, as football fans, we love to see more regular season games as opposed to a bunch of preseason games. 17-game season, it's going to be rough on the players. Absolutely. We've seen injuries time and time again in football, and this is just going to make it another game for them to, get fatigued or get injured. But that's the one downside of it. Everything else, it just seems like a plus. We get more football, and it's going to be an exciting time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a football fan, you got to be excited about adding an extra game to the season. But what always is interesting is the injury question, because of the fact that they're getting after it every single week with a very short layoff. And so it'll be interesting to see if the injuries go up or how that works. I also my only concern about it adding one more game to the season is the fact that a lot of times when you get to the end of the season, there's teams that are clearly in or clearly out, and so maybe we see an extra game each year where they're deciding to rest their starters for the playoffs. And so, hopefully that's not happening too much. That's not too widespread. But anytime you add a game to a season, that has to be, something that you think about, a factor that you have to kind of deal with as a football fan.
And the other thing is, we're in a passing dominant league, like in no league like we've ever seen before. Like in the 80s and 90s, it wasn't this crazy.
Right.
And so all these big names that are like breaking all the records for passing yards and passing touchdowns and all that, they're breaking these records because of the way the league is set up now and is built around the pass game. And so adding another game is just going to be more padding to the stats. And so we're going to see more records being broken, and it's going to seem to take away from the players in the past who truly earned those records when there wasn't 17 games in the season, and when it wasn't normal for running backs to get over 1,000 yards a season and for quarterbacks to throw for 4,000 yards. Now it's like, wow, if a quarterback doesn't hit 3,500, 4,000 yards, they're not good. If a running back doesn't hit at least 1,000 yards, they're trash. It's going to just add on to that and, more stats padded to records being broken.
Right, and it becomes really hard to compare players across eras. I mean, we have that really, really impressive record that O.J. Simpson had for the longest time for rushing yards, and it's gotten broken since. But you can't help but think, he had a 17-game season, how much more rushing yards he would have had, and his record would probably still stand today. But because of the seasons being expanded, I think at that time they were either 12 or 14 games, and now they're 16. And so if he played 2 extra games, he probably would still hold the record. But because of the fact that they expanded the season, made it longer, he lost that record and lost that recognition. And so there's a lot of records like that across the NFL that will be broken. And we can't help but think, what would that specific player have done if they had extra games? And it's going to be really hard to compare players across generations and across different ages in the NFL.
And do you think that we're going to see shorter lifespans on NFL players now that the season is extended and there is more chance for injury?
I do believe that. I think as we as we progress, I mean, every single year, players get bigger, faster, stronger because, NFL scouts are looking for superlative characteristics out of their players. They want the biggest ones, they want the strongest ones, they want the fastest ones, and so they're demanding more and more out of these young athletes. And what happens is when guys get bigger and stronger, they hit harder. They get hit harder,
right.
And what that leads to is more injuries. And so, like I said, I do believe injuries will go up. But I do also think that with the preseason, I don't think teams should play their starters almost at all. I think maybe one or two series and then get their starters off the field because they don't want to risk injuries. And every time you're out in the field, whether you like it or not, you're at risk of getting injured. And so I think it's smart for teams and players to be cognizant of the injury risk that is constantly there playing in the NFL, and to be very careful about pulling out their players early if they have a big lead, or if they're winning, they've already won their division and locked up a playoff spot. Moving again, taking their players out and resting them over maybe the final 2 weeks of the season. So they're gonna have to be creative in the ways that they use their star players, because they're gonna want to keep them safe and healthy for the playoffs, just like any team should want to do.
And the preseason has never really been about showcasing your starters or showcasing your superstars and veterans and stuff. It's more about seeing your rookies and the people that you've drafted and brought onto your team who are newer, and players who are second and third string who don't really see the field that often. You're seeing how well they play, and you're seeing how you want to place your starters and place your team depth chart for that following season based on how the backups and rookies and things do in the preseason. So that's what's the most important about preseason. It's not really about players who you always see on the field during the regular season, because we already know their skill, we already know what they're capable of. It's the people who we don't know. Right. And so that's all the topics I had for us today. Anything else on your mind, Jacob?
No, again, we just appreciate everyone that tunes in each and every week and supports us. We're hoping to grow this. We want to reach as many fans as possible of football and of the NFL in general. And so we're so thankful that you watch us each week. And if you have friends that are football fans, would love to have you share our page and have them like our page as well. Sorry about last week. We had some technical difficulties, but we're all squared away this week. And again, if there's anything you guys would like to see us discuss in the coming weeks, feel free to message us on Facebook, or drop a comment in the comment section, and we'll definitely cover that for you. So I don't have anything else, but we appreciate you guys tuning in, and can't wait to see you again next week.
Thank you guys, and thank you, Jacob.